You're tuned to the wavelength of your own beauty. It's your host, Ahmed Yunus, and this is The Study. Pura vida, baby. Let's get it. So, yeah, I mean, like, what's the mission statement of my podcast? You know, I think I would quote ragamuffin Stephen Marley, the son of the great Bob Marley, when he said, "Together they can't break us, we are strong. Divided and the road leads to destruction. Don't you fall a prey to Babylon. They want to pull us all in different directions. So they take you from your roots, teach you their own truths. Open up your mind. Please don't be so blind. I'm not in it for the fame. I'm in it for the love. When it's all said and done, we're more than blood." Okay, now I'm reading Rick Stengel's words. When he recounted the story for me nearly 60 years after the wintry afternoon when it happened, Mandela was rueful, almost pained. And not because he was recalling the physical sensation of the operation, but because he believed that he had not reacted well. The pain of the procedure had died away, but not the pain of having been faint-hearted. Quote, "I faltered," he said, looking down. Quote, "I did not yell it out in a firm voice," unquote. He felt that the other boys had been braver, stronger. He says he discovered that he was not naturally brave. Perhaps none of us are, and that he would have to learn how to be so. He was disappointed in himself all those many years later, but the ritual had had its intended effect. He had resolved that he would always look strong, that he would never appear to falter. Okay, I am continuing to read Rick's words. "Courage is not the absence of fear," he taught me. "It's learning to overcome it." Let me give you another scenario that Rick Stengel recounts about Nelson Mandela. In the 1950s, he once drove down to the Free State to see Dr. James Moroka, the courtly and old-fashioned president of the African National Congress, the ANC. On the way there, in a small village in the Free State, one of the most conservative areas of South Africa, Mandela's car grazed a white boy on a bicycle. The boy was shaken up but not hurt. The first thing Mandela did was to duck down and hide a copy of New Age, a newspaper that was a favorite of ANC members, which had been sitting in the front seat of the car. Just owning a copy of a banned publication in those days could yield a 5-year prison sentence. A police sergeant arrived a few moments later and took a look at him and the injured boy and said, "Kaffir, you will shit today." Mandela replied, quote, "I don't need a policeman to tell me where to shit," unquote. He paused when telling this story and then said, quote, "I decided to be aggressive, but I was frightened. I can pretend that I am brave and that I can beat the whole world," unquote. And then his voice trailed off. I can pretend that I'm brave. In fact, that is what he did. And that is how he would describe courage, pretending to be brave. Fearlessness is stupidity. Courage is not letting the fear defeat you. When the policeman advanced on him, Mandela told him to be careful, that he was a lawyer and he could ruin the policeman's career. Then, as Mandela writes in his Robben Island diary, quote, "No one could have been more surprised than myself when I noticed the sergeant hesitate," unquote. It had worked. Later that evening, the policeman released him and he was back on his way. So there's a fake it to make it element. Fake it till you make it element to courage. Courage is not the absence of fear. This is Rick. Mandela does not see bravery as the province of only a few.
Some of us are tested greatly, but everyone is tested somehow. He always said to me that his wife Winnie had been far braver than he, even though he had been in prison for longer than she had. While he was sealed off from life's daily problems, he explained, she had to wrestle with the daily difficulties of life under apartheid and raise 2 girls. Mandela's highest praise for someone he considers courageous is, quote, he did very well, unquote. But that he does not mean that the fellow was a dramatic hero or that he risked his life in a great endeavor, but that day in, day out, he remained steady under trying circumstances. That day in and day out, he resisted giving into fear and anxiety. All of us are capable of that kind of bravery. And fortunately, there is only bravery most of us are called upon to demonstrate. That is the only bravery most of us are called upon to demonstrate. The second chapter of the book is entitled Be Measured. And Rick focuses on a story or just a small anecdote of Ahmed Kathrada, who I met when I was young in high school and whose story I relayed earlier today. So the passage begins, I was once sitting next to Mandela in the back seat of his armor-plated BMW and his driver was lost. This was not unusual. His motorcade often went awry. The driver was accelerating and making screeching turns as if to make up for lost time. Mandela leaned forward and said to the fellow, quote, let's be calm, man, unquote. It's amazing. I can hear Dr. Hathout's voice when I read that. Let's be calm. In the midst of turbulent situations, Mandela is calm and looks for calm in others. In fact, he radiates calm. Lose control and you lose the situation. Ahmed Kathrada was in prison with Mandela for nearly 3 decades and says he only saw him angry on 2 occasions. Control is the measure of a leader, indeed of all human beings. Calm, he always says, is what people look for in tense situations, whether political or personal. They want to see that you are not rattled, that you are weighing all the factors, and that your response is measured. Let's be calm, man. As often as I could, I would accompany him on his morning constitutional. One morning that spring, it was April 10th. I arrived at his house at 5 minutes to 5. It was still dark. A couple of his bodyguards were sitting in a car listening to music. It was unseasonably cold, and I could see them blowing on their hands through the foggy windows. Mandela emerged from the house a little after 5, wearing his favorite black and gold tracksuit. He started walking south. Each morning he would choose a different route, hoping to see some sights from his boyhood or stumble upon a village he had not visited before. He liked to point out landmarks and explain their history. That morning, as always, we were accompanied by his bodyguards. Usually 2 walked in front of him and 2 behind. I would walk about 10 feet to the side, close enough to hear him if he wanted to talk, far enough away that he could feel alone. Walks for him were a kind of meditation, and we usually walked in silence. Which again is just mind and heart blowing, because I am the son of a man who walks for meditation. And perhaps here is the appropriate moment, since this anecdote fell upon an April 10th, which is my birthday. I worked for Rick Stengel at the State Department. And he became a very close friend to me and a mentor. And I remember once taking a walk with him from the State Department to Chinatown across the White House grounds and walking back at night in the dark. And it's so crazy to read this passage and think to myself, like, this is exactly the experience I had with Stengel. Like in the beginning when he said, being around anyone who has spent much time with Nelson Mandela knows that it is not only a great privilege, but a great pleasure. His presence is golden, luminous. You feel taller, finer. Most of the time he is upbeat, confident, generous, fun. That's Rick Stengel. That is the power of a mentor. That's the power of living with a legend. You can choose beauty for yourself in this life. You can choose to be more like Nelson Mandela than different. And I've known many people who have worked with and crossed paths with President Mandela, like President Mary Robinson of Ireland and President Martti Ahtisaari of Finland, and others who formed with President Mandela the Elders, which is an organization that has a constellation of brilliant humans around it that attempts to do good in the world, in the name of wisdom, in the name of science, in the name of knowledge, in the name of love. And among those people I have traveled with and lived with, those who reflect the beauty of a Nelson Mandela.